The morning I watched a county sheriff's deputy practically laugh in my HOA president's face was the morning I realized my quiet neighborhood had been harboring a tyrant for far too long. My name is Aaron Fitzpatrick, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook subdivision of Henderson, Nevada for 3 years without major incident. Sure, there were the usual complaints about grass height and mailbox colors, but nothing that ever escalated beyond a stern letter in my mailbox. That all changed when I decided to start my firewood business. I had lost my job as a logistics coordinator 6 months earlier when the company downsized. Unemployment was running out, and I needed income fast. My neighbor 2 houses down, Martin, mentioned that he made decent side money selling firewood during the fall and winter months. Nevada gets cold in the winter, and plenty of people in Henderson and the surrounding areas had fireplaces they actually used. The idea stuck with me. After researching the market, I discovered Martin was right. There was real demand, especially from people in the older neighborhoods where fireplaces were standard. I spent a week crunching numbers and realized I could make this work if I operated it properly. The key was buying in bulk and selling at competitive prices while maintaining quality. I looked into all the legal requirements. I applied for my business license through the city of Henderson. I registered with the state of Nevada. I made sure my insurance covered commercial activity. I even checked the zoning laws for my property, which was when I discovered something interesting. My entire neighborhood, despite being residential, was actually zoned as mixed-use commercial and residential. This was apparently common for newer subdivisions in Henderson, designed to allow home offices and small businesses without requiring special permits. The zoning designation was RC2, which specifically permitted home-based businesses as long as they did not create excessive noise, traffic, or other disturbances beyond normal residential activity. Deliveries were explicitly allowed during business hours, defined as 7 in the morning to 7 at night. I read through the entire municipal code twice to make sure I understood it correctly. With my legal bases covered, I invested my remaining savings into inventory. I found a supplier outside of Las Vegas who sold seasoned oak, pine, and mesquite at wholesale prices. I placed my first order for 3 cords to start, which would be delivered on a Friday morning in early October. Thursday night, I posted signs on my property advertising my new business. Simple wooden signs with firewood for sale and my phone number. I also listed my inventory on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Within hours, I had a dozen inquiries. People wanted to stock up before prices went up closer to winter. Friday morning arrived bright and clear, temperature already hitting 60 degrees by 8. The delivery truck was scheduled to arrive between 9 and 10. I was in my garage organizing space when I heard the rumble of the truck turning onto our street. The delivery driver, a weathered guy named Carlos, backed his flatbed into my driveway with practiced ease. The truck was big but not excessive, about the size of a standard moving truck. He had done deliveries in residential neighborhoods hundreds of times. "Where do you want it?" Carlos asked, hopping down from the cab. "Along the side of the house, if you can stack it there," I said, pointing to the area between my house and the fence line. I had already laid down pallets to keep the wood off the ground. Carlos nodded and began unloading. He had the wood on a mechanical lift system that made the process relatively quick. I helped guide the pieces into neat stacks. We were maybe 15 minutes into the work when I heard the voice. Excuse me, what is going on here?" I turned to see Patricia Kendrick marching across my lawn like she was leading a cavalry charge. Patricia was the HOA president, A woman in her mid-50s with blonde hair that looked perpetually fresh from the salon, and an expression that suggested she smelled something rotten at all times. "Morning, Patricia," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "Just getting a delivery." "A delivery?" She looked at the truck with undisguised horror. "That is a commercial vehicle. You cannot have commercial vehicles parked in this neighborhood. It is against HOA regulations." Carlos glanced at me, clearly wondering if he needed to stop. I shook my head slightly. "It is just a delivery, Patricia. It will be gone in about 30 minutes. That is not the point." She had her phone out now, taking pictures. "You are running a business from your home. That is absolutely prohibited. This is a residential community." "Actually, it is not prohibited," I said calmly. "I checked the zoning laws. We are in an RC2 zone which allows home-based businesses." Patricia's face turned an interesting shade of pink. "The zoning does not matter. The HOA covenants supersede zoning laws. I am calling the police right now to have this truck removed for illegal parking and trespassing." "Patricia, that is not how any of this works," I started, but she was already dialing. I listened in disbelief as she spoke to the dispatch operator, claiming there was a commercial vehicle illegally parked and blocking traffic, which was completely untrue. The truck was entirely in my driveway. Carlos looked uncomfortable. "Man, I do not want trouble. I have other deliveries." "Just keep unloading," I said. "She cannot actually stop you. You are on my property with my permission." Patricia stood at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, phone still in hand, taking video now. A few other neighbors had emerged from their houses, curious about the commotion. I recognized Tom and Linda from across the street and Margaret from next door. "Aaron, what is happening?" Margaret asked, walking over. "Getting a firewood delivery. Patricia called the cops because she thinks it is illegal." Margaret frowned. "Why would a delivery be illegal?" "It is not," I said. "But Patricia seems to think HOA rules override actual law." Patricia overheard and whirled toward us. "The HOA rules are legally binding. You all signed the covenants when you purchased your homes. Those covenants clearly state no commercial activity." "That is interesting," Tom called from across the street. "Because I run an accounting business from my home office. Does that violate the covenants too?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "That is different. You are not having commercial trucks come to the neighborhood." "I have clients park in my driveway all the time," Tom countered. "Some drive work vehicles with company logos." Before Patricia could respond, a Henderson Police Department cruiser turned onto our street. The officer parked at the curb and stepped out, a young guy who looked like he was maybe 25. His name tag read Officer Chen. "Someone called about illegal parking," he asked, looking between the truck and Patricia. Patricia immediately launched into her complaint. "Officer, thank you for coming. This man is running an illegal commercial operation from his home, and that truck is creating a hazard." Officer Chen walked around the truck, which was completely within the boundaries of my driveway. He looked at me. "This your property?" "Yes, sir." "This is my house, my driveway. This is a delivery I scheduled." "What are you having delivered?" "Firewood. I am starting a firewood sales business." The officer nodded slowly. "And you have permission for this vehicle to be here?" "Yes, I hired them to deliver." Officer Chen turned to Patricia. "Madam, I do not see any violation here. The truck is on private property with the owner's permission. It is not blocking the street or creating any hazard." "But he is running a business," Patricia protested. "That is against our HOA covenants. You need to shut this down." "Madam, HOA disputes are civil matters. I cannot enforce HOA rules. That is something you need to take up through your association's processes." "So you are just going to let him violate our community standards?" Officer Chen's expression remained professionally neutral. I am going to let him receive a delivery on his own property. Yes. If you believe he is violating HOA covenants, you need to follow your association's procedures. That might mean sending a formal complaint to the board, scheduling a hearing, or taking civil action if it comes to that. But there is no criminal violation here. Patricia looked like she might explode. What about the zoning laws? This is a residential zone. Let me check, Officer Chen said. He pulled out a tablet from his cruiser and tapped at it for a minute. This address is zoned RC2, which is mixed use. Home-based businesses are permitted under that zoning classification as long as they meet certain criteria. He looked at me. Do you have a business license? Yes, sir, through the city of Henderson and registered with the state. Can I see it? I jogged inside and grabbed my file folder, bringing out both my city business license and my state registration paperwork. Officer Chen examined them both carefully. These look in order, he said, handing them back. Mr. Fitzpatrick here is operating legally as far as I can tell. This is outrageous, Patricia said. Her voice had gone shrill. I will be contacting the city about this immediately. This neighborhood will not become some industrial zone. Madam, with respect, one firewood delivery does not make it an industrial zone, Officer Chen said. Now, if you will excuse me, I have actual calls to respond to. He gave me a polite nod and returned to his cruiser. As he drove away, Patricia turned her full attention back to me. This is not over, Aaron, not by a long shot. I will be calling an emergency HOA meeting, and we will be discussing your blatant disregard for our community. Patricia, I am not disregarding anything. I followed every law. I have the right to operate a business from my home. You may have the legal right, but you do not have my permission. As long as I am president of this HOA, I will fight this every step of the way. With that, she turned and marched back toward her house, which was 4 doors down on the opposite side of the street. Carlos had continued working through the entire exchange and was now almost done. Man, that lady is intense. Yeah, she has a reputation. Margaret lingered after Patricia left. Aaron, I do not think this is going to end well. Patricia holds grudges. I know, but I need this income. I am not doing anything wrong, I believe you, just be careful. The rest of the delivery went smoothly. Carlos finished stacking the wood. I signed the delivery confirmation, and he drove off. My 3 cords of firewood were neatly stacked along my fence line, covered with a tarp I had purchased specifically for this purpose. I spent the afternoon arranging the wood and taking inventory. Several people called from my online ads, and I scheduled 3 deliveries for the next day. Things were looking up. That evening, I received an email from the HOA. It was a formal notice of violation, claiming I was in breach of Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA covenants, which prohibited commercial enterprises that create excessive traffic, noise, or diminish property values. There would be a mandatory hearing in 2 weeks to discuss my violation and potential fines. I read through my copy of the HOA covenants that night, all 47 pages of them. Article 7, Section 3 was vague and clearly written to give the board maximum discretion. But it also required proof that the business was actually creating problems. A one-time delivery and a few customers picking up firewood would not reasonably qualify as excessive traffic. I decided to fight this properly. I called a lawyer the next morning, a guy named Robert Chen, no relation to the police officer, who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. His office was in Henderson, and he could see me that afternoon. Robert's office was in a small strip mall near Green Valley. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me everything," he said after the preliminaries. I explained the situation, showed him my business licenses, the zoning information, the HOA covenants, and the violation notice. Robert read through everything carefully, making notes on a legal pad. Okay, here is the situation. You are absolutely in the right from a legal standpoint. The RC2 zoning supersedes HOA covenants when it comes to permitted uses. There is established case law in Nevada supporting this. The HOA can enforce aesthetic standards and regulate how you conduct the business, but they cannot outright prohibit something the zoning allows. So I will win if this goes to a hearing, probably, but it depends on the HOA board. If they are reasonable, they will back down once you present the legal facts. If they are not reasonable, they might try to fine you anyway, and then you would need to take them to court to challenge the fines. That sounds expensive. It can be. The good news is that when HOAs lose these cases, they are often required to pay the homeowners legal fees. The bad news is that you still have to front the costs until that happens. What should I do? Go to the hearing. Present your case calmly and professionally. Bring your licenses, the zoning documents, and any evidence that your business is not creating the problems they claim. I can draft a letter on your behalf citing the relevant statutes and case law. That sometimes convinces boards to drop the issue before it escalates. How much will that cost? For the letter, $250. If you need me to attend the hearing, that is $500. If it goes to litigation, we will need to discuss a retainer, but let us hope it does not come to that. I paid for the letter, which Robert said he would have ready in 3 days. I left his office feeling more confident. I was not doing anything wrong, and I had the law on my side. Over the next week, my business actually grew. I sold half a cord to a couple in an older neighborhood who needed it for their wood stove. I delivered another half cord to a guy with a pizza oven in his backyard. Word of mouth was spreading, and my prices were competitive enough that people kept calling. Patricia, however, was not idle. I started receiving daily emails from the HOA about various violations on my property. My grass was apparently a 1/4 inch too tall. My trash cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes longer than allowed on pickup day. My car was parked at an angle in my driveway that was not perpendicular enough. It was clear harassment, and I documented everything. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday evening at 7. It would take place in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that hosted HOA meetings and the occasional birthday party. I arrived 15 minutes early with a folder full of documents. Robert's letter was in there, along with printouts of the relevant zoning codes, my business licenses, and photos showing my property and the minimal impact of my business. The clubhouse had a large multipurpose room with folding chairs set up in rows facing a long table where the board members would sit. About 20 neighbors were already there. Some I recognized and others I had only seen in passing. Patricia entered with the other board members. Vice President Donald Harrison, a retired postal worker, Treasurer Nancy Martinez, who worked as a nurse, and Secretary Karen Wilson, a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. Karen was younger than Patricia, maybe early 40s, but she seemed to share Patricia's fondness for rules and enforcement. Patricia called the meeting to order with a gavel she probably enjoyed using way too much. They went through standard business first, approving last month's minutes and discussing landscaping contracts for the common areas. Then, Patricia's expression shifted into something more severe. We now come to new business. Specifically, a violation complaint against Aaron Fitzpatrick of 847 Meadowbrook Lane. All eyes turned to me. Mr. Fitzpatrick has been operating a commercial enterprise from his residence in direct violation of our community covenants. This activity has included commercial vehicle traffic, outdoor storage of materials, and advertising on his property. We have photographic evidence of these violations. Patricia pulled up photos on a laptop connected to a projector. The images showed Carlos's delivery truck, my firewood stacks, and my simple "Firewood for sale" signs. These activities are unacceptable in our community and set a dangerous precedent. If we allow Mr. Fitzpatrick to operate a business, what is next? Auto repair shops, warehouses. Our property values will plummet. A few people murmured in agreement. Mr. Fitzpatrick, you have the opportunity to respond to these allegations, Patricia said, her tone making it clear she expected me to grovel. I stood up and walked to the front, holding my folder. Thank you. I would like to start by stating that I am not violating any laws or, in fact, any HOA covenants. My business is fully licensed by the city of Henderson and the state of Nevada. More importantly, this property is zoned RC2, which specifically permits home-based businesses. I handed copies of the zoning documents to each board member. As you can see, the zoning code explicitly allows commercial activity that does not create excessive noise or traffic. I have had exactly one delivery truck visit this property in 2 weeks, and that truck was parked entirely within my driveway for approximately 30 minutes. I have had perhaps a dozen customers stop by to pick up firewood, which is no different than having friends or family visit. Karen Wilson spoke up, but the covenants say no commercial activity. Actually, they do not, I said. The covenants prohibit commercial activity that creates excessive traffic, noise, or diminishes property values. I have not created any of those problems. I have also consulted with a property attorney who confirms that zoning laws supersede HOA covenants when it comes to permitted land uses. I handed out copies of Robert's letter. Patricia's expression darkened as she read it. Furthermore, I continued, I would point out that other residents operate businesses from their homes. Tom Gregory runs an accounting firm. Susan Palmer does wedding photography and often has clients visit. Mike Torres repairs computers. None of these have been cited as violations. Those are different, Patricia said quickly. They do not involve outdoor storage. My firewood is neatly stacked and covered, no different than someone storing patio furniture or gardening supplies. The covenants do not prohibit outdoor storage. They require it to be neat and well-maintained, which mine is. Donald Harrison, the vice president, looked uncomfortable. Aaron, I think you make some good points. Maybe we need to review this more carefully before taking action. Patricia shot him a look that could have melted steel. Donald, we have a responsibility to enforce our standards. I understand that, Patricia, but if the zoning allows it, we might not have legal standing to stop him. The covenants give us the authority to regulate the neighborhood. Within reason, Nancy Martinez added. I read through the letter from Aaron's attorney. It makes sense. If the city says he can do this, can we really override that? We can and we should, Karen Wilson said firmly. This is exactly why we have an HOA, to maintain standards that go beyond what the city requires. The debate continued for another 10 minutes. It became clear that the board was split. Patricia and Karen wanted to fine me and force me to stop. Donald and Nancy were hesitant to take action that might expose the HOA to legal liability. Finally, Patricia called for a vote on whether to impose a fine of $100 per day until I ceased business operations. Patricia and Karen voted yes. Donald and Nancy voted no. The tie meant the motion failed. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. This is not over, she said, looking directly at me. We will be consulting with the HOA's attorney and revisiting this matter. That is your right, I said calmly. But I will continue operating my legal business in the meantime. The meeting adjourned shortly after. Several neighbors came up to me, some offering support, others asking questions about my firewood prices. Tom Gregory clapped me on the shoulder. You handled that well. Patricia hates losing. I noticed. Watch your back. She will look for any excuse to come after you. Tom was right. Over the following days, Patricia seemed to be watching my property constantly. I would see her driving by slowly, sometimes stopping to take photos with her phone. She filed complaints with the city about my business, though those went nowhere since I was properly licensed and operating legally. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I had placed an order for another 3 cords of wood, a larger delivery than the first one. The demand was increasing as November arrived and temperatures dropped. I scheduled the delivery for a Friday morning again, figuring the same time frame would work. Carlos showed up right on schedule with his truck. We greeted each other, and he started unloading. I was helping stack the wood when Patricia appeared, and this time she was not alone. Karen Wilson was with her, along with 2 men I did not recognize. Stop right now, Patricia shouted. That truck is blocking the street and creating a hazard. I looked at the truck, which was, just like last time, completely in my driveway. Patricia, the truck is not blocking anything. It is blocking the sidewalk. That is a violation of city code. She was technically correct that about 2 feet of the truck's rear bumper extended over the sidewalk, though it was not actually blocking pedestrian access since my driveway was wide enough that people could easily walk around it on my property. I have already called the police and code enforcement, Patricia announced triumphantly. They are on their way. One of the men with her, a guy in his 60s wearing a polo shirt, stepped forward. I am Richard Morrison, the HOA's attorney. Miss Kendrick has retained me to handle this matter. I need to inform you that you are in violation of multiple HOA covenants, and the association is prepared to seek an injunction to stop your business activities. Carlos looked at me nervously. Man, should I stop? No, I said firmly. You are on my property doing work I hired you to do. Keep going. Richard Morrison frowned. Mr. Fitzpatrick, I advise you to reconsider. Legal action can be expensive. So can defending frivolous lawsuits, I replied. I am operating legally and I will continue to do so. A Henderson police cruiser arrived, and I was relieved to see it was Officer Chen again. He got out and surveyed the situation with an expression that suggested he was already tired of this. Let me guess, he said. Another delivery dispute. Officer, that truck is blocking the sidewalk in violation of City Ordinance 12.7.4, Patricia said immediately. Officer Chen walked around the truck, measuring the space with his eyes. The sidewalk is not completely blocked. Pedestrians can still pass. That is not the point. Any obstruction is a violation. Madam, if I cited everyone who had a vehicle bumper extending slightly over a sidewalk during a delivery, I would do nothing else all day. This is a temporary situation, and it is not creating a hazard. I am not issuing a citation. Then I want your supervisor's name, Patricia demanded. That is your right, Officer Chen said wearily. He gave her a business card with the police department's contact information. My supervisor is Sergeant Williams. You are welcome to file a complaint. A city code enforcement truck pulled up as Officer Chen was leaving. A woman in a city uniform got out, clipboard in hand. Her name tag identified her as Linda Santos. I got a call about a zoning violation, she asked. Patricia launched into her complaint again, pointing at the truck and my firewood stacks and the signs on my property. Linda Santos listened patiently, took notes, and then asked to see my business license and the property's zoning designation. I provided both, along with my permits. She spent 10 minutes reviewing everything, walking around my property, measuring distances with a laser measure, and taking photos. Finally, she came back to where we were all waiting. "Mr. Fitzpatrick, your business appears to be in full compliance with city codes and zoning regulations. Your outdoor storage meets setback requirements, your signage is within size limits, and your delivery is temporary. I do not see any violations." Patricia's face went through several shades of red. "How can you say that? He is running a lumber yard from his house." "He is selling firewood, madam, which is permitted under RC2 zoning. If he were storing industrial quantities or creating noise or environmental issues, that would be different. But this is a small-scale home-based business that fits within the allowed parameters." "What about the traffic?" "We have had dozens of vehicles coming and going." Linda Santos looked skeptical. "Dozens? Many vehicles," Patricia amended. "Mr. Fitzpatrick, how many customers would you say you have had visit your property in the past month?" Linda asked. "Maybe 15 or 20 total," I said honestly. "Most stay less than 10 minutes while I help them load firewood into their vehicles." "That is well within normal limits for residential traffic," Linda said. "I am not going to issue any citations here." She handed me back my documents and left. Patricia stood there, visibly shaking with anger. "This is corruption," she said. "You must have paid someone off." "Patricia, that is enough," I said, my patience finally wearing thin. "I have done everything by the book. I have the proper licenses, the correct zoning, and I am not bothering anyone. You need to accept that and move on." "I will never accept this. Never." Karen Wilson put a hand on Patricia's arm. "Maybe we should go back to Richard's office and discuss our options." The three of them left, Patricia shooting daggers at me with her eyes the entire time. Carlos finished the delivery, clearly glad to be done with the drama. "Good luck, man. You are going to need it with that lady." He was right about that. The next week, I received a certified letter from Richard Morrison's law office. The HOA was filing for an injunction to stop my business operations, claiming I was creating a nuisance and violating restrictive covenants. They were also seeking to impose fines of $100 per day for every day I had operated the business, which now totaled over $5,000. I took the letter to Robert Chen, my attorney. He read through it and nodded slowly. "They are overreaching badly. This will not go their way, but we will need to respond formally. I recommend we file a motion to dismiss the injunction request and counterclaim for harassment and attorney fees." "How much is this going to cost me?" "I will need a retainer of $3,000 to start. But like I said before, when you win, and you will win, the HOA will likely be ordered to pay your legal costs." I did not have $3,000 in cash, but I had credit available. I put it on a card, hoping this would resolve quickly. The injunction hearing was scheduled for December in Clark County District Court. In the meantime, my business continued growing. I was selling about 1.5 cords per week, which was generating decent income. I hired a teenager from the next neighborhood over, Jake, to help with deliveries and stacking. He was strong, reliable, and happy to earn money after school. Patricia documented everything. Every customer who came by, every delivery, every sign, every piece of wood. She compiled it all into a binder she called her evidence file. The hearing arrived on a cold Thursday morning. The courthouse in downtown Las Vegas was busy, with multiple cases being heard. Robert and I sat at the plaintiff's table, since we were the defendants but also counterclaiming. Patricia, Karen, and Richard Morrison sat at the other table. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Martha Preston. She had a reputation for running an efficient courtroom and not tolerating nonsense. "This is the matter of Meadowbrook HOA versus Aaron Fitzpatrick," she said, looking over her paperwork. "I have read the filings from both sides. Mr. Morrison, you are representing the HOA." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you are seeking an injunction to stop Mr. Fitzpatrick from operating a firewood sales business from his home." "That is correct, Your Honor. Mr. Fitzpatrick is in clear violation of the HOA's restrictive covenants, which prohibit commercial activity in this residential subdivision. His business has created excessive traffic noise and is diminishing property values." "Mr. Chen, your response." Robert stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Fitzpatrick's property is zoned RC2, which explicitly permits home-based businesses. He has obtained all necessary licenses and permits. The HOA's restrictive covenants cannot override permissible land uses under the zoning code. Furthermore, the HOA has failed to provide any concrete evidence that Mr. Fitzpatrick's business has created the problems they allege." Judge Preston looked at Richard Morrison. "Do you have evidence of excessive traffic?" "Yes, Your Honor." He presented Patricia's binder, which had photos and dates of every customer visit. The judge flipped through it. "I see maybe 20 different vehicles over a 2-month period. That is less than one per day on average. That does not strike me as excessive. Your Honor, in a quiet residential neighborhood, any commercial traffic is excessive. By that logic, no one could have visitors. Mr. Chen, do you have the zoning ordinances with you?" Robert handed up a copy, flagged at the relevant sections. Judge Preston read for a few minutes. "Mr. Morrison, I am looking at the RC2 zoning definition, and it clearly allows home occupations and businesses that do not create significant impacts beyond normal residential use. The threshold is defined as more than 10 vehicle trips per day on average. According to your own evidence, Mr. Fitzpatrick is well below that threshold. Your Honor, the HOA covenants provide additional restrictions beyond zoning. They can provide aesthetic restrictions and regulate the manner of operation, but they cannot prohibit a use that is permitted by zoning. There is ample Nevada case law on this. Do you have any evidence that Mr. Fitzpatrick's operation is creating noise, environmental issues, or safety hazards? He stores firewood outdoors, Your Honor, which is unsightly and not in keeping with the neighborhood character. Is outdoor storage prohibited by the covenants?" Richard Morrison hesitated. "Not explicitly, but the covenants do require properties to be maintained in a manner consistent with residential aesthetics." "And is the wood neatly stacked and covered?" "It is, but it is still commercial inventory." Judge Preston looked unimpressed. "So it looks no different than a homeowner storing wood for their own fireplace, just in larger quantities. Your Honor, if we allow this, what is to stop other residents from opening businesses? The neighborhood could become completely commercialized." "That is a slippery slope argument, Mr. Morrison, and not a very compelling one. The zoning code already sets limits on what types of businesses are allowed and how they can operate. The HOA's role is to enforce compliance with those limits, not to create new prohibitions." Judge Preston closed the folder in front of her. "I am denying the injunction. Mr. Fitzpatrick is operating within his legal rights under the zoning code. The HOA has not demonstrated that he is violating any covenants that are enforceable. Furthermore, I am concerned about what appears to be selective enforcement. Mr. Chen, your filing mentioned other residents who operate businesses from their homes. Has the HOA taken action against them?" "No, Your Honor." "Why not, Mr. Morrison?" "Those businesses are different in nature, Your Honor. They are professional services conducted indoors. But the covenants do not distinguish between types of businesses, do they? Not specifically, but there is an implied difference between a quiet home office and outdoor commercial activity. I do not read covenants based on implication, Mr. Morrison. I read them based on what they actually say. If the HOA wanted to prohibit outdoor businesses specifically, they should have written that into the covenants. They did not. Judge Preston turned to the countersuit. Mr. Chen, you have filed a claim for harassment and attorney fees. Yes, Your Honor. The HOA has engaged in a pattern of harassment against Mr. Fitzpatrick, including filing frivolous complaints, excessive surveillance, and pursuing this legal action despite clear evidence that his business is legal. We request that the court order the HOA to pay Mr. Fitzpatrick's attorney fees and enjoin them from further harassment. Mr. Morrison, do you dispute the claim of harassment? Your Honor, the HOA was simply exercising its duty to enforce the covenants. By calling the police multiple times for legal activity, by filing code enforcement complaints that were found baseless, by pursuing an injunction that, frankly, had little merit from the start, Richard Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, the HOA believed it had legitimate concerns. Belief is not the same as evidence, counsel. I am granting Mr. Fitzpatrick's request for attorney fees. The HOA will pay his legal costs associated with defending this action. I am also issuing a warning to the HOA board. If I see another case like this where an HOA attempts to prohibit legal activity without proper grounds, I will consider sanctions. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Richard Morrison said quietly. Patricia looked like she might faint. Karen Wilson stared at the table. We were dismissed. Outside the courtroom, Robert shook my hand. That went about as well as it could have. You will get your legal fees back, which should cover everything we have spent so far. How long will that take? A few weeks for the judgment to be processed. Then the HOA has 30 days to pay. If they do not, we can pursue collection. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I could continue my business without fear of legal action. Over the next several weeks, I received notice that the HOA had paid the judgment, which was about $4,500 total. I used that money to order more inventory and buy a small utility trailer to make my own deliveries easier. Patricia remained HOA president, but her power had been significantly diminished. The failed lawsuit had cost the HOA money that came from everyone's dues, and people were not happy about it. At the next annual meeting in January, she faced a recall vote. I attended the meeting, curious to see what would happen. The community center was packed, far more people than had come to my violation hearing. Tom Gregory stood up during the open forum. I think we need to talk about the leadership of this board. Patricia's vendetta against Aaron Fitzpatrick cost us thousands in legal fees for a case we had no business filing. That money came from our dues, money that should have been used for maintaining our common areas. Several people voiced agreement. Patricia tried to defend herself. I was protecting our property values and community standards. By harassing a neighbor who was following the law, someone called out. By wasting our money on a lawsuit a judge said had no merit. Another added, the vote was called. Patricia was removed as president by a margin of 42-8. Donald Harrison was elected as the new president. Karen Wilson resigned from the board entirely. After the meeting, Donald approached me. Aaron, I want to apologize for how this all went down. Patricia let her personal feelings override common sense. That will not happen again. I appreciate that, Donald. I also want to say, if you ever need anything or have concerns about how you are operating your business, come talk to me. We can work things out without lawyers and judges. That sounds good. Life in Meadowbrook returned to something resembling normal. My business continued to thrive. As winter set in and temperatures in Henderson dropped into the 30s at night, demand for firewood increased. I was selling 2 to 3 cords per week, which was enough to replace the income I had lost from my previous job. Jake, my teenage helper, turned out to be a great employee. He was talking about saving money for college, and I was happy to help him do that. We developed an efficient system for deliveries and customer service. Patricia mostly stayed out of sight. I would occasionally see her driving through the neighborhood, but she no longer stopped to photograph my property or file complaints. The few times we crossed paths at the mailbox or the grocery store, she would turn away without acknowledging me. In February, I received an unexpected visit from Linda Santos, the code enforcement officer who had inspected my property during the dispute. She pulled up in her city truck and approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Fitzpatrick, do you have a minute?" "Of course. Is there a problem?" "No problem at all. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something positive. Your business has been a great example of how home-based businesses can work in residential areas when done properly. We are updating our guidelines and educational materials, and I wanted to ask if we could use your operation as a case study." "Really? Really? You followed all the rules, got proper permits, and have been operating responsibly. We want other people to see that it is possible to run a business from home without creating problems for neighbors. I would be happy to help with that." Linda took some photos of my setup and interviewed me about my process for obtaining licenses and maintaining compliance. She said the materials would be published on the city's website and used in workshops for aspiring business owners. As spring arrived and the weather warmed, firewood demand naturally decreased. I had anticipated this and pivoted to also selling camping wood and wood for outdoor fire pits, which remained popular year-round in Nevada. I also started offering delivery services to campgrounds around Lake Mead and other recreation areas, which opened up new markets. Jake graduated from high school and went off to UNLV in the fall, but I hired 2 new part-time helpers to replace him. The business had grown enough that I needed the extra hands. One afternoon in September, almost a year after the whole dispute had started, I was out front stacking wood when a car pulled up. An older couple got out, and I recognized them vaguely from the neighborhood. "Are you Aaron?" the man asked. "Yes, sir. I am Bill, and this is my wife Sandra. We live a few streets over. We wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For standing up to Patricia and that HOA board. They had gotten completely out of control, fining people for ridiculous things, making everyone feel like they were walking on eggshells. What you did, fighting back and winning, it changed things. The neighborhood is better now." "I just wanted to run my business," I said. "And you had every right to. But you also showed everyone else that the HOA is not all-powerful, that we have rights too. So thank you." They shook my hand and left. I stood there for a moment, feeling proud not just of my business but of having stood up for what was right. That evening, I sat on my back patio with a beer, looking at the neatly stacked cords of firewood along my fence line. It had been a journey, one I had never expected when I first decided to sell firewood. I had learned a lot about zoning laws, HOA regulations, and the importance of standing your ground when you know you are right. My phone rang. It was a customer calling to order 2 cords for delivery next week. I took down the information and scheduled the delivery. Business was good. As I hung up, I saw Patricia walking her small dog past my house on the sidewalk. She glanced at my property, at the firewood stacks and the small sign advertising my business. For a moment, our eyes met. She looked away first and kept walking. I took another sip of my beer and smiled. Life in Meadowbrook had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA under Donald's leadership was reasonable and focused on actual community maintenance rather than power trips. My business was sustainable and growing. The legal drama was behind me. Sometimes standing up to bullies means going through hell for a while. But on the other side of that hell is usually something better, something worth fighting for. For me, it was the freedom to earn a living doing honest work, and the satisfaction of knowing I had not backed down when someone tried to push me around. The Firewood business continued to grow over the following year. I expanded my offerings to include different types of wood, kindling bundles, and fire-starting supplies. I built a simple website and started taking orders online. The business that Patricia had tried so hard to shut down became a respected part of the community. In December, almost 15 months after the initial confrontation, I was featured in a Henderson local business spotlight article. The newspaper interviewed me about starting a home-based business and navigating regulations. They mentioned the HOA dispute briefly, framing it as an example of how knowing your rights and following proper procedures can help you overcome obstacles. The article brought even more customers. People appreciated supporting a local business owner who had stood up for himself. Some customers mentioned they had their own HOA horror stories and respected that I had fought back. Patricia sold her house in February and moved out of Meadowbrook. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she had found the atmosphere no longer welcoming after losing her position and the lawsuit. I felt no particular joy in her leaving, just relief that the conflict was truly over. The new family who bought her house was young with 2 small children. They introduced themselves when they moved in, and the husband mentioned he was planning to start a consulting business from home. I gave him the contact information for my attorney and told him about my experience with the HOA. "Thanks for the heads up," he said. "But it sounds like the current board is reasonable, very reasonable. Just make sure you have your licenses and know the zoning rules. That will protect you if anyone ever raises concerns." Donald Harrison remained HOA president and did an excellent job. He focused the board's energy on actual community improvements, like upgrading the playground equipment and organizing neighborhood events. The atmosphere in Meadowbrook became friendlier and less tense. My business stabilized at a level where I was earning slightly more than I had at my previous corporate job, but with far more flexibility and satisfaction. I was my own boss. I set my own hours, and I provided a service people genuinely needed and appreciated. Jake came back to work for me during summer breaks from college. He told me that the money he had earned helped him graduate debt-free. Knowing I had contributed to that made me proud. On a warm evening in May, I was sitting on my front porch when Tom Gregory walked over with 2 beers. He handed me one and sat down in my other chair. "How is business?" he asked. "Good, steady. I am thinking about expanding into wholesale, maybe supplying some of the campground stores around Lake Mead directly." "That is great, man. You have really built something here." "Thanks. It has been a journey." "You know what I realized the other day," Tom said. "When you stood up to Patricia, it changed more than just your situation. It changed the whole neighborhood. People felt like they could push back on stupid rules, could question things that did not make sense. The HOA became a service organization instead of a dictator. You did that." "I just wanted to sell firewood," I said with a laugh. "Yeah, but sometimes doing something simple for the right reasons has bigger effects. You showed people that standing up for yourself works, that you do not have to just accept it when someone with a bit of authority tries to push you around." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our beers and watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Kids rode bikes in the street. Families walked dogs. Someone was barbecuing, and the smell of grilling meat drifted through the air. This was what a neighborhood should be. Not a place ruled by fear of violation notices and fines, but a community where people could live their lives, pursue their dreams, and support each other. My firewood business had given me all that and more. It had given me financial stability, personal satisfaction, and the knowledge that I could stand up for myself when it mattered. It had also inadvertently helped transform Meadowbrook into a better place to live. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about that morning when Officer Chen had stood in my driveway and confirmed what I already knew. I was operating legally, and no one had the right to stop me. That moment had been the turning point, the validation that gave me the confidence to fight back against Patricia's harassment. The legal system had worked the way it was supposed to. The judge had seen through the HOA's overreach and ruled based on facts and law rather than emotions or power dynamics. Justice had prevailed, and that gave me faith in the system. My phone buzzed with a new order notification. Someone in Boulder City wanted 3 cords delivered next week. I confirmed the order and added it to my schedule. Business continued, steady and reliable. Tom eventually headed home, and I stayed on the porch a while longer, enjoying the evening. Life was good. The firewood business had started as a necessity, a way to pay bills after losing my job. But it had become something more important. Proof that an ordinary person could stand up to bullies, fight for their rights, and win. The wood stacks along my fence represented more than inventory. They represented freedom, independence, and the right to earn an honest living without interference from petty tyrants with clipboards and gavels. As I finally headed inside for the night, I glanced back at my property. The small sign advertising my business stood illuminated by the porch light. Tomorrow I would stack more wood, help more customers, and continue building the life I had fought for. Patricia had tried to stop me with threats, harassment, police calls, and lawsuits. She had failed at every turn because she was wrong and I was right. The law was on my side, the facts supported me, and I had been willing to stand my ground. That is what it takes sometimes. Knowing you are right, having the courage to fight, and refusing to back down when bullies try to push you around. I had done all 3, and my reward was the life I had now, running a successful business in a peaceful neighborhood. The firewood business taught me more than just how to split logs and satisfy customers. It taught me about resilience, about knowing your rights, and about the importance of standing up for yourself even when the people opposing you seem powerful. Patricia had been HOA president, had an attorney, and had the backing of the board's authority. But none of that mattered when she was trying to prohibit something the law allowed. All her power and position could not override basic legal rights and proper zoning regulations. That lesson extended beyond just my situation. It applied to anyone facing unreasonable authority, whether from an HOA, an employer, a government agency, or any other entity that tries to overstep its bounds. Know your rights, document everything, seek proper legal advice, and stand firm when you are in the right. I never wanted to be a test case or a champion for homeowners' rights. I just wanted to sell firewood and pay my mortgage. But sometimes circumstances push you into a larger role, and you have to rise to the occasion. Looking back on everything that had happened, from that first delivery truck arrival to the courthouse victory to Patricia's eventual departure, I felt grateful for the experience despite all the stress and difficulty. It had made me stronger, more knowledgeable, and more confident. The business continued to thrive as months turned into another year. I eventually saved enough to buy a larger truck of my own, reducing my reliance on delivery services. I hired a part-time accountant to manage the growing complexity of the business finances. I even started paying myself a regular salary instead of just drawing money out as needed. Meadowbrook became my home in a deeper way than before. I was not just a resident anymore. I was an established business owner, someone who had shaped the community's recent history. Neighbors greeted me warmly. New residents often heard the story of my battle with the HOA and appreciated what it had meant for everyone. The legal precedent from my case apparently helped other homeowners in Henderson and nearby areas who faced similar situations with their HOAs. Robert Chen, my attorney, told me he had cited the case several times in negotiations with other HOA boards, and the mere mention of it usually led to quick resolutions in favor of homeowners. That ripple effect was something I had not anticipated but deeply appreciated. My fight had made things easier for others, had helped push back against HOA overreach throughout the region. One person standing up had created positive change for many. On the 3-year anniversary of starting the business, I hosted a customer appreciation barbecue at my house. About 50 people showed up, many of them regular customers who had become friends. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, kids played in the yard, and people shared stories about their fireplaces and fire pits and camping trips. Donald Harrison stopped by and gave a short speech thanking me for being a good neighbor and a positive addition to the community. It was a far cry from the violation hearings and hostile confrontations of the early days. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, I stood in my backyard looking at the remnants of the gathering. Folding tables with empty plates, a few forgotten drinks, children's toys scattered in the grass. It was a scene of community and friendship, exactly what I had hoped to build. The Firewood business had given me all that. It had given me purpose after losing my job, income to support myself, and a sense of accomplishment from building something from scratch. But more than that, it had given me the opportunity to stand up for what was right and, in doing so, to make my community a better place. I thought about Aaron Fitzpatrick from 3 years ago, unsure and worried about the future after losing his job. I wished I could tell him that everything would work out, that the struggle ahead would be worth it, that standing up to Patricia and the HOA would lead to victory and success. But past me would have to learn those lessons the hard way, just as I had. The journey, difficult as it was, had been necessary. It had forged me into someone stronger and more capable. As I cleaned up the backyard, I heard a vehicle pull into my driveway. It was a late customer, someone who had seen my website and needed firewood for a camping trip tomorrow. I helped him load a half-cord into his truck, accepted payment via my phone app, and sent him on his way with a smile. That was my life now, helping customers, running a business, being part of a community. Simple, honest work that provided a good living and personal satisfaction. Nothing Patricia or the old HOA board had done could take that away, because it was built on a foundation of legality, proper procedure, and hard work. The moon was rising over Meadowbrook as I locked up my shed and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring more orders, more deliveries, more customers. The cycle continued, day after day, season after season. My phone showed a text from Robert Chen, my attorney who had become a friend over the years. He was checking in to see how things were going and to let me know he had just resolved another HOA dispute using my case as precedent. Another homeowner protected, another overreaching HOA board put in its place. I texted back my congratulations and thanks. The fight I had fought continued to pay dividends for others, continued to protect homeowners' rights throughout Henderson and Clark County. That felt good, like my struggle had purpose beyond just my own situation, Standing in my kitchen, looking out the window at my neatly stacked firewood inventory, I felt contentment. This was my American dream, modest but real. A home I owned, a business I built, a community where I belonged, and the knowledge that I had stood up for my rights and won. Patricia had tried to take all that away with her petty tyranny and abuse of HOA power. She had failed completely. The firewood business she tried to destroy had flourished. The neighborhood she tried to control had rejected her authority. The legal system she tried to manipulate had ruled against her. Justice, sometimes delayed but ultimately delivered, had prevailed. That was the real lesson of the whole experience. When you are right, when you follow the rules, when you stand firm against bullies and tyrants, you can win. It might take time, money, and stress, but you can win. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt grateful for everything that had happened, good and bad. The conflict with Patricia had been unpleasant but necessary. It had tested me and proven I could handle adversity. It had shown me I was capable of fighting for myself and winning. Tomorrow the sun would rise on another day in Meadowbrook. I would stack wood, fill orders, help customers, and continue building my business. Life would go on, peaceful and productive, because I had stood up when it mattered and refused to back down. That was the legacy of my battle with the HOA. Not just victory in court or a successful business, but the knowledge that ordinary people have power when they stand up for their rights. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way. I had learned it too, but from the winning side. The firewood delivery truck that had started it all, with Carlos at the wheel backing into my driveway that October morning 3 years ago, had been the beginning of a journey I never expected. A journey through conflict and legal battles, through stress and uncertainty, but ultimately through to victory and success. I would do it all again if I had to. Standing up for yourself is never easy, but it is always worth it. That was what I would tell anyone facing similar circumstances. Know your rights, stand your ground, and fight when you must. The law exists to protect people like us from people like Patricia. With that thought, I fell asleep, content in the knowledge that I had built something good and defended it successfully. The American Dream Firewood Business Edition was alive and well in Meadowbrook, Henderson, Nevada.